Hello, this is Satya Magdalena here. Welcome to my channel. I am a dancer and I am a poetess, and I am also a therapist, a priestess and a healer, combining all the different modalities that I have learned and that I have experienced and practiced through my own healing. Now, my healing journey has come to a very interesting place. And this interesting place has been guided, as weird as it may sound, but by the soul of my cat. So recently, on 26th of February, when Venus went conjunct Neptune, which meant the dissolution and transformation and changing and coming into light all the unconscious relationship patterns. On that day, my kitty chose to pass away. His name was Magician. Now, when I took an evening and a night to connect to his spirit, it was not just that he was still here, but he gave me a very particular task. And the task is to write a book. Now, writing a book, for me as a poetess, as a writer, as a creative, it makes all the sense. But the book that my magician guided me to write is a cookbook. And now that is something that hasn't made any sense for me, especially because I have 7 projects on my table that are way more connected to what I have been teaching, what I have been working on with myself and with other men and women, on sexuality, on femininity, you name it, on tarot even. But cookbook. Anyhow, when I felt into that deeper, I realized how much it actually does make all the sense. And why it makes all the sense is because food and relationship to food and to my body is actually the central and the deepest thing that I have struggled with throughout my whole life. And it is also the last thing that finds its healing and dissolution, because it is so deep. It is so deep in the most primal, in the most core wounds and traumas that are there. Now, when I started writing, trusting the guidance, having a 3 days water fast before, really tuning into my body and my relationship with food, I have discovered and I have noticed something that also makes a perfect sense. And that is that when I write about food, eating disorders, food addiction, and what is happening in my body now as the last bits of healing the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, which is familiar to so many people, and that all cause a lot of shame and embarrassment and being uncomfortable with. And that is why these things are so difficult to tackle, to talk about, to heal, because there is so much shame around them, because they are so primal. Yeah. And when I have started writing, when I have started digging in, going into that spiral, because in healing we don't have direct ways, we don't have linear ways from A to B. It is a spiral. It is the timeless time when we go into ourselves, into our souls, into the deep healing journey. So going into that spiral has brought up for me another side of, let's say, addiction or disorder, because the cookbook my cat guided me to write is a magical cookbook for the teenage girls and for the women like me who have this teenage girl, and even those smaller girls who we haven't even found contact with yet, because the teenage girl and her protection mechanisms are covering it. Then our judgment, our blame, our shame, all of it. So this cookbook is for those girls who are in that age now, or for those girls within us, grown-up women today, struggling with food, digestion, and now comes the other side that has been strongly in my writing on my journey: intimacy, sex, and sexuality. So obviously these things are connected as we are talking about the relationship to our body. Safety, the primal safety. I am safe when I have my basic needs met, right? So this is the need for food, shelter, sex, actually. But then there are the finer basic needs that are more emotional needs, and these are the needs, but they are as basic and as essential for our survival as human beings. And these are the needs for safety emotionally, for love and connection and belonging. So those needs oftentimes are not met, even if the physical safety needs are met. So what might happen, as it has been for me, is that I have found ways to use sexual intimacy to get the love that I actually need. And that has made me to deny what my body and what my heart are actually telling me. It has made me basically incapable of saying no. So now when I walk back through my life and I see what has been happening in my relationship to my body and food, then it makes a perfect sense in this loop. Because that side of the equation has made me feel disconnected from my body and ashamed of my body, and of course hide that at the same time, because there is a need to feel sexy and wanted in order to feel connection, belonging, and intimacy. So that is very shortly the so-called equation or a loophole that has been that has been happening. And I'm going to share more about that on the channel while I'm continuing digging in. But in this introductory little video today, I wanted to share with you something that came in the session that I was giving this morning to this beautiful young woman. And she came to me to work with relationship patterns and the way of attaching to someone who is not good for them. You know, we can call it codependency or love addiction. That is oftentimes combined with sex addiction, not necessarily, but could be, all depending on our relationship with our body and our sexuality and how we cope with the trauma, because it is the trauma that is in the core of it. So what I wanted to share today, because I am writing a lot about addiction here and talking about the disorders, either sexual behavior disorders that can be compulsive, like pornography or sex addiction, can be part of the picture, or avoiding intimacy and sexuality in total. These are parts of that loop, of that equation. For each and every one of us a little bit differently. It's individual. And then on the other side, there is the relationship to our bodies, to ourselves, to our emotions, to our basic feeling of safety. And on both sides, we can feel that what is missing in order for us to feel good, to feel the love, to feel the belonging, to feel the connection, or to feel the primal safety, the health, the happiness, the joy coming from being healthy in our bodies. We can feel the lack of that healthy connection and operating in this world through addictions. And very often we do. Because an addiction, whether it's behavioral or chemical, whether it's based on some substance we consume or a behavior that we go into, if you talk about eating, for example, then binge eating is not really about food, right? It's not the food we are addicted to. It's something else. It's that, the binge, yeah, we can't control it. Now the same can happen with masturbation, with going for that clitoris or ejaculation orgasm that we know that lasts for a second, and then we feel rather empty or depleted, and there are so many other ways to give ourselves the pleasure that actually fills the body and serves our healing and our health and our vitality. But when the binge, let's call it the binge, when there is the binge, then there is nothing outside of the binge. And that's where there is no control. I'm not digging deeper into the biochemistry of addiction in this video. There are many other videos, for example from Gabor Mate, that you can watch. But what I would like to bring out, inspired by that session with that beautiful young woman today, talking about addictions and talking about how to change that pattern of hers in her life, to choose going back to people who are not good for her, to choose staying in relationship begging to be loved by someone who doesn't give that to them, and all the confusion around whether I'm addicted to sex or relationships or love, or at some point in her life, as in my life, it has also been alcohol, or drugs. And it brought me to this reminder that all addictions that we use to feel better, in their core, they come from the same place. And in the session today, I explained it as a whole. So when healing journey is here in order for us to become whole again, the wholeness, right? The integrity. So in my case, when I'm digging deep into the food and the body relationship and all that's coming from there, and then seeing the connection with the sexuality and intimacy and the ways I have been operating, and seeing how those two meet and come together, it brings me back to wholeness. Yeah, because I do it through love, and because I do it when I have enough resource to go into that, to go in so deeply. I have my resources, my ways to alchemize the pain into love, into pleasure, and to grow from that. So I'm going into the wholeness. Now, when we are not on the path of healing, of meeting ourselves, of meeting our exiled parts, of going down to feel those feelings and meet those needs that we have been ashamed of and denying, and that we have used addictions for healing them, then we can imagine it like going into the whole. Yeah, not a hole, but a hole, a deep hole. So if you have been addicted in one way or another, more or less, more severely or less severely, if you are a human being, then you know sometimes, some moments in your life when you feel like there is a huge hole that needs to be filled with something. And that something is, in the case of addictions, a substance or a behavior. And when that hole calls us in, then we find ourselves in the binge that we cannot control. However, it is possible to change that. And that change goes through going deliberately into that hole. And the hole might be calling us either by feeling of loneliness, depression, despair, hopelessness. It's more similar to this empty feeling, to this hopeless, empty feeling. I'm alone and I'm isolated. So that kind of God-forsaken state is a very common trauma response. Now that can be that, but the whole might also be calling through anxiety, through something surging up that you have no explanation for, and then you try to control it, and you say, it's what? There is no explanation, there is no reason. Why the fear? Why the panic? Why the anxiety? Why the tears? Why my body is constricting? Why is it happening? And you try to control it, and once again You don't want to go there. You're afraid to lose yourself there. Be it a hole of hopelessness and loneliness and depression, or be it the anxiety that might take over and that you are afraid of. So it can be that you take the substance for numbing it, or to the opposite, in order to feel something, to feel the pleasure, even for a moment. And through the pleasure, we feel connection. So that's the thing, and that's how a dopamine receptors, oxytocin receptors, serotonin producing, how all the hormonal and biochemistry side comes in and supports the addiction to continue, the pleasure hormones, because the pleasure gives the feeling of connection that we are really longing for. So what we do really when we heal and when we go deeper and we really want to make the change, even in the deepest patterns and addictions that seem impossible to cure, as that with the food very often is. We might be free of all the rest, but the food, shit, it just pertains, because it's so primal and it's so deep, and we actually need food to live and to survive. So when we go into that hole, then that hole, as I explained it today, is composed of two types of things. And these are the things that shouldn't have happened, but they did. Examples for that side are a parent being an addict, an alcoholic, for example, domestic violence, sexual assault, an accident, a too early death of somebody. I'm recalling the big T traumas now. There could be also school bullying. There could be emotional unavailability, emotional avoidance. So all of these things that shouldn't have happened, but they did happen, are part of that whole. And for each and every one of us, the whole is different. We need to discover our whole. And the things that shouldn't have happened but did happen to us, they have brought consequences, and they have made us to exile some parts of us, those parts that couldn't handle that at this moment because we were too little. And many of those things are not even in the conscious memory, as in my own case, the earliest sexual trauma is in the unconscious. My conscious brain doesn't remember it because I dissociated. That was my protection mechanism. Now, through that spiral that I'm going through with the guidance of my kitty cat soul, and walking my path as a poetess and as a healer, doing my own self-healing first, I also find the parts of me that have been hidden and suppressed. And now the same happens. We find those parts when we go into the other side of the whole. And the other side of the whole are the things that should have happened, but they didn't. You see? So just like the whole is expressing and dragging us in different ways, as we talk, as I said before, it can be this feeling of emptiness that we try to fill with feeling some connection and some pleasure, or it can be the other way around, the feelings that are too intense to feel and we try to numb them. So in the same way, the composition of the hole, the soil, if you imagine a hole in the ground, yeah, the soil, what is it composed of? So the other cluster of components of that whole are the things that were not there, that should have been there, and that left that emptiness and the needs unmet. So those things are emotional safety, physical safety, love, connection, freedom to be ourselves, to go and make our mistakes and have the safe space to come back to the unconditional love, the teachings, the play, our basic needs being met. And the basic needs are not just the shelter, the food, and the physical safety, but it's also the emotional needs that are actually as substantial for the human being's survival, and there is tons of research on that. So those things that should have met those needs and provide us the environment to grow up into a human being who is healthy, vital, self-confident. If those things were not there, then that is another part of that whole that was created, and that as grown-ups, unconsciously, consciously, we try to fill. Yeah. However, that whole, if we imagine it as a soil, is not only composed of the traumatic parts that need our attention and healing, from where we need to find ourselves, our feelings, our exiled parts, and bring them back home, and learn what do we truly need. Yeah. So besides that, in the soil, there is life, there is fertility, there is love, there is all that we need. You see, that's the trick. And that was my huge inspiration for today's session that inspired me to make that first video. We go into that hole that we are so afraid to go in, so afraid that we do things that are bad for us, be it the relationships, be it the substances, be it overeating, be it work out till the death, you know, to have the body the way we want it to be, to have control at least over something. So besides that, what we fear, there is also all that we are looking for, all that we need. So today, when we journeyed in with that woman, and she was ready to deal with the anger and with fear that were there in the beginning of the session, that showed themselves, and she was noticing them and staying present at the same time, feeling the readiness and excitement even to go in and to see and to explore. So she was in the resourceful self, so we were safe to go to explore those difficult emotions and the pain underneath them. However, what happened was that the journey, and that turned out really shamanic today, the hypnotic journey, it took us straight into the happy, cheering girl. And that happy, cheering girl was accompanied by a motherly soul wisdom. So there was the love, there was the joy that she had been looking for in those relationships through sex. It was all there. And that session was meant to connect with that, because in the beginning she felt it difficult to approach that cheering, joyful, little happy girl, even doubting if it's really she, because there is so big light, big bright light around her, that she felt that, wow, she can't go through that light. But the thing is, this was her own light that we found deep in the hole, right there. It was her own love, her own wisdom that was right there. And today, during that first session, it was meant for us to connect to this, to know that this is me, this light is my light, and this girl is also my inner child, because the inner child is not only the wounded one, but also the one who remembers the innocence of joy and pleasure and being herself. So that is my sharing, my message for today. If you are out there and if you are struggling with addiction, with eating disorders, with digestive issues, as I am myself at the moment, still, this is my last bits of healing. Then know that your whole is right there, waiting for you. And that whole, if you find, because you need to find, you can't do it alone. You can do some of it alone, but you can't do all of it alone, and you need someone to hold that safe space for you, someone who has gone there, who has got you. Yeah. So I want you to know that your whole is, as it's never filled by anything that you put in there, hoping to either feel more or not to feel what you don't like to feel. It's not going to be filled, it's not going to be resolved. And in the same way, it's not going to go away. It's not going to close. It's there for you, opening itself up as you are ready to go in, as you are safe enough to go in, as you have resources enough to go in, as you are ready to meet yourself. And I want you to know that yes, you meet your exiles, yes, you meet the pain, yes, you meet that what you fear the most. Carl Jung says, our task is where our fear is, or the other way around. Where our fear is, there is our task. So you will meet all that you fear and all that you have been trying to avoid. But you will also meet that what you long for, that what you don't even know that is there in you, that bright light, that beautiful, healthy girl who has so much to teach you, who has to give you. All of it is there. And this unconditional love of the Mother Earth, of the soil, it's there. You are not going to bury yourself, okay? You are not going to be buried. It's not your funeral. It's your journey within. And I promise you, the swirl will bring you out of the hole into the wholeness. Into the wholeness, because you are a whole integral being holy and whole, right? Same roots. So I encourage you to take that journey, because the only way out really is in. And if you need a guide, happy to be here for you. And let me finish that with a little poem that for me has been part of the healing journey, finding the feelings I never allowed myself to feel, having them all stirred up in this relationship to this man I loved. What a gift. What a gift. It's never too late, dear. Never too late. From sad and ignored, I moved to alone and scared. I couldn't sleep. I panicked and hated myself for not doing better, for finding myself again here in the fear of rejection and abandonment. Overwhelmed, my gut clenching, my breath getting shallow, my body tensing up. Feeling like flight, fight, and freeze are all on at the same time. And no, I cannot go to a bar and pick up a guy. I can't get myself high or load with sugar. I'm just not doing it anymore to myself. And I can't reach out because I should do better. And I already did reach out in a way, but he hasn't replied a thing. Was it wrong? Did I say something wrong? Does he reject me now? Am I too needy? My body trembles and freezes. I cannot handle my feelings. I would like to die. I'm all alone and so scared. And there's no one there. There's no one ever there. So that was one of my holes I chose to move into, and I chose to feel, and I chose to make it into poetry. And my mantra is, it will either dissolve or become a poetry. And the same is possible for you. You are your healer, you are the alchemist. And in your pain, in your fear, in that hole, there is the light and there are the gifts.